What if the woman you thought was just a quiet neighbor turned out to carry the weight of an entire town's history, when a single dad offers a helping hand to a stranger living in the most infamous house on the block? He has no idea. His life and his community is about to change forever. This is a story about kindness, redemption, and the quiet power of staying. If you're someone who believes in second chances and the beauty of rebuilding, you're in the right place. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss another heartwarming, life-affirming story. Now, let's begin. Struggling, single dad. Thought he was helping a neighbor until the woman said, "I built this town." The storm rolled in like a warning, rattling the windows of Jack Lawson's pickup as he rounded the final bend toward the quiet neighborhood. His daughter Lily, already asleep in the passenger seat, clutched her favorite sketchpad to her chest as the rain began to hammer the windshield. Jack's knuckles tightened on the steering wheel. The last thing he needed tonight was a call from Mrs. Phelps about a downed fence, but the old woman didn't have anyone else, and Jack never could say no to someone needing help. When he pulled up in front of her small clapboard house, the fence was barely holding. Wind gusts tugged it sideways like a sail ready to snap. Jack lifted Lily gently and carried her inside to the worn sofa where Mrs. Phelps greeted them with hot cocoa and 100 questions. After settling Lily in with a blanket, Jack threw on his jacket, grabbed his toolbox from the truck, and got to work under the flickering street lamp. Rain soaked him to the bone, but the rhythm of hammering and repairing kept his thoughts from drifting too far, especially to the empty space in the bed back home. By the time he was finished, the rain had eased into a drizzle. Mrs. Phelps pressed a Tupperware of oatmeal cookies into his hand. "You're a good man, Jack Lawson," she said. Jack offered a tired smile, but something flickered in the corner of his eye, a faint glow too steady to be lightning too early for dawn. He turned and squinted down the street. The Hartley house. It had sat abandoned for nearly 2 decades, its once grand windows boarded up, its yard overgrown with thorny vines. A relic from a past the town tried to forget, but tonight one upstairs window glowed gold. Jack stared for a long moment. Maybe it was a squatter. Maybe the bank had finally sold it. Either way, curiosity tugged at him. That house didn't just wake up one night after sleeping for 20 years. The next morning, sunlight sliced through the fog as Jack and Lily drove back past the Hartley house. The curtains were drawn now, but the freshly swept porch and clean windows told him someone new had moved in. "Daddy, do you think someone's finally fixing it up?" Lily asked from the back seat, her feet swinging. Jack hesitated. Maybe, or maybe someone's just passing through, but he couldn't leave it alone. After dropping Lily at school and finishing a quick roofing patch job across town, he stopped by the Hartley house, toolbox in hand, just to say hello. That was all. He knocked once. No answer. Again. The door opened. She was nothing like what he expected. Late 30s, maybe. Jeans, white blouse boots, still muddy. Hair pulled into a low ponytail, face clean of makeup. She didn't flinch or smile. "Yes," Jack shifted, suddenly aware of how wet his boots were. "Hi. Sorry to bother you. I noticed the house looked alive again. I live down the block. Jack Lawson." She eyed the toolbox. "Are you selling something?" He blinked. "No, ma'am. I fix things. I thought if you needed help with repairs, this place has been asleep a long time." A pause. She studied him like she was reading a blueprint beneath his skin. Then, "I'm Eleanor." "Nice to meet you, Eleanor." She stepped back. "The kitchen sink leaks." Jack smiled. "Let's take a look." The inside of the Hartley house surprised him more than the woman. The wallpaper was the same faded floral from decades ago, but someone had dusted the old chandelier. A sheet had been lifted from the baby grand piano, and on the fireplace mantel one photograph framed in brass. A man and a girl. The man stern-eyed. The girl no more than 10, laughing as if she didn't belong in that rigid house. Eleanor caught him looking. "Family?" he asked. Her voice cooled. "History." Jack didn't press. Instead, he moved to the sink, kneeling to inspect the pipes. Silence stretched between them as he worked, interrupted only by the drip, drip, drip of old copper and the occasional squeak of his wrench. "You grew up here?" he asked without looking up. "No," she said too quickly, then softer. "Yes, a long time ago." Jack replaced the gasket. "It's a good house, strong bones." She tilted her head. "Like people." He met her eyes. There was something unreadable there. Old pain wrapped in new armor. That afternoon, Lily returned with her sketchpad full of daffodils and swirling skies. "She's not just a stranger," Lily said over dinner. "She feels like someone who's sad, but trying not to be." Jack arched an eyebrow. "You met her once. I just know." She munched on a carrot. "You always say people show who they are by what they fix." Jack paused, her words hitting closer to home than he expected. That night, after Lily was in bed, Jack sat on the porch watching the faint light flicker again in the Hartley house. Something about that woman lingered with him. Her silence, her sharp eyes, her guarded hands. He didn't know her story. He didn't even know if he wanted to. But part of him, maybe the same part that never could walk away from a broken fence or a leaking pipe, felt like the house wasn't the only thing that needed fixing. And Eleanor Hartley. She didn't look like a woman who had simply returned for nostalgia. She looked like someone testing the ground beneath her feet, like she was deciding whether the place that made her could ever remake her in return. Jack leaned back and exhaled slowly into the night. The woman at the edge of town wasn't just passing through, and something told him this time neither was he. The next week unfolded in layers like old wallpaper peeled back to reveal a story too long, buried beneath silence. Eleanor didn't smile much, but she didn't refuse Jack's help either. He found himself returning to the Hartley house after dropping Lily off at school, staying longer each time, though the repairs were hardly urgent. The kitchen cabinets needed realignment. The attic stairs creaked dangerously, and a section of floor near the library bowed with age. But he'd dealt with worse. Still, there was something different about working here. The silence in the house wasn't the kind he was used to. It wasn't neglect or abandonment, it felt expectant, like the house was holding its breath. Jack arrived one morning to find Eleanor already in the garden tugging weeds from the old stone path leading to the greenhouse. Her sleeves were rolled hands, dirt-streaked. She looked up only briefly. "You're early," she said. "You're surprised I thought you worked by appointment." Jack smirked. "I work where I'm needed. And this place," he nodded toward the leaning greenhouse, "is screaming for help." Eleanor handed him a rusted trowel. "Then stop talking and start digging." They worked side by side in quiet rhythm. The glass panels above creaked and the wind leaves rustled like whispers from an earlier time. It felt oddly intimate, this wordless labor. Halfway through repairing a collapsed shelf inside the greenhouse, Jack finally broke the silence. "You know a lot about this place. More than someone just renting would." She didn't look at him. "Maybe I remember more than I meant to." "Is that why you came back?" "I came back because the city was too loud," she said, hammering a loose bolt harder than necessary. "Too fast, too shallow." He studied her for a moment. "And this town isn't, I don't know yet." Later that afternoon, Jack stopped by the town hardware store. The bell jingled overhead, and Old Man Griggs gave him the usual gruff nod. "Working up on Hartley Hill." "Huh," Griggs said, handing Jack a box of screws. Jack raised an eyebrow. "You always know where I am." "People talk Lawson. That house has history." Jack waited. Griggs leaned on the counter. "That girl, Eleanor. I seen her once before. Long time ago. Used to run around town with her mother. Quiet kid. Sharp eyes. Disappeared after the Hartley scandal." "What scandal?" Griggs lowered his voice. Old Man Hartley owned half the businesses on Main. Real estate. Loans. When he died, it turned out he'd mortgaged people's homes behind their backs. The whole town nearly folded. His daughter left and never came back. Jack absorbed the words slowly. Eleanor Hartley. He should have guessed. The name wasn't common. That night, Jack and Lily curled on the couch watching an old cartoon. But his mind drifted back to the Hartley house, to Eleanor's tight smile and guarded answers. Lily looked up at him. "Did you know she fixed the art room at school?" "What she gave money, I think. Miss Jen said someone paid to fix the paint sinks and buy new brushes. No one knows who." Jack's chest tightened. He hadn't told Eleanor about Lily's drawings, about how much the arts program meant to her, but somehow she had known. The next morning, Jack returned to the Hartley house with new paint for the hallway walls and a pie from Marcy's bakery. When he stepped inside, Eleanor was at the fireplace polishing the same brass-framed photo. He set the pie down gently. "Brought you something?" She glanced up. "You didn't have to. I wanted to. Also, these walls are a crime against color." A hint of a smile tugged at her lips. Agreed. They painted together in companionable silence, the faded beige walls slowly turning a soft sage green. Light streamed through the windows, catching dust motes like tiny stars. For a fleeting moment, it felt like something new could grow here. Jack stepped back to admire their work. "You know," he said, wiping his hands on a rag, "this house is like a person." Eleanor tilted her head. "Oh, beat up, but still standing. A little bruised, maybe. But underneath all the rot and cracks, something strong is still holding it up." She set her brush down. "You talk about houses the way people talk about hearts." Jack paused. "Maybe it's the same thing." Eleanor looked at him for a long time. Then, barely above a whisper, "What do you think happens when you restore something and it still doesn't feel like home?" Jack thought of Lily's drawings, his wife's unused corner in the closet, the kitchen table with only 2 chairs. "You keep working," he said quietly, "and one day it stops creaking when you walk across it." That evening, Eleanor stood alone in the freshly painted hallway. She reached up and ran her fingers along the smooth new wall. The silence felt warmer now. Not so expectant, just waiting. She returned to her journal. The entry was short but deliberate. Day 18. The town is not the same. The man isn't either. Maybe the test was never about them. Maybe it's about me. Meanwhile, in town, Pastor Riley lit a candle in the church's side chapel. He'd seen Eleanor walk the main street twice now, her gaze lingering on every shop window like a woman measuring more than price tags. He whispered to himself, "Welcome home, Eleanor." But whether she'd truly returned or was still deciding remained a question hanging in the air. Just like the scent of fresh paint in the house at the edge of town, Jack never thought a broken greenhouse hinge would lead to the most honest conversation he'd had in years. But that's how life worked in this town. Truth slipped in through cracks, never the front door. The morning sun was gentle, casting a golden hue over the dew-laced grass. Jack stood in front of the Hartley house with a thermos in one hand and a box of hinges in the other. Eleanor opened the door, wearing a faded blue sweatshirt, hair loose for the first time. For a second, she looked ordinary. But her eyes, those sharp, ocean-gray eyes, were still full of locked doors. "You're back," she said, stepping aside. "I never left," Jack replied with a half-smile. "Just working my way around the neighborhood." She arched an eyebrow. "Do all your neighbors get free labor and coffee, only the ones with haunted greenhouses?" They made their way to the old structure, glass still cracked in places, its wooden ribs groaning softly in the breeze. Eleanor held the door as he ducked inside. As Jack replaced the rusted hinge, Eleanor crouched beside him, watching. "Why do you do it?" she asked suddenly. He looked up. "Do what fix everything for everyone, even people you barely know." Jack paused the screwdriver mid-turn. "Because no one did when I needed it." Silence stretched between them like a frayed wire. "My wife got sick," he said, voice quiet. "Cancer. Fast and brutal. I couldn't afford help. I was too proud to ask. By the time I did, it was too late. People said all the right things, meals, prayers, flowers, but what I needed was a neighbor to just show up. Eleanor's eyes softened a flicker of something more than pity. So now Jack continued standing. I show up. It's not about the fence or the sink. It's about someone knowing they're not alone. Eleanor turned away, brushing dust from her jeans. That's a rare thing these days. Jack nodded. Doesn't mean it has to be. Later that afternoon, Marcy cornered Jack outside the general store, her apron still dusted with flour. "So, you're fixing up the Queen's castle, huh?" Jack chuckled. "It's just a house, Mars." Marcy crossed her arms. "Jack, you know I love you like a brother, but you have a type. And it starts with damaged and ends with complicated." He leaned against his truck. "She's not a type. She's different. Different how she listens. She works hard. She doesn't pretend." Marcy narrowed her eyes. "She's hiding something. Everyone's hiding something. Not everyone moves into the most notorious house in town without telling anyone their last name." Jack shrugged, but the conversation lingered like smoke in his mind. That evening, Jack took Lily for ice cream. They sat on the hood of the truck sharing a sundae as the sky blushed pink. "She's kind," Lily said between bites. "Who, Miss Eleanor? I told her I liked drawing animals, and the next day someone left a whole book about wildlife sketching on the bench at school. No note. Just there." Jack turned to her. "You're sure it was her?" She pretended not to know, but she smiled when I said thank you. Jack looked out at the horizon. "You think kindness can be anonymous?" Lily nodded, licking her spoon. "The best kind is." The next morning, Eleanor was gone when Jack arrived. He let himself in as she'd allowed him to and walked into the study to find a manila envelope on the desk with a note clipped to it for the school. "Use it where it counts." Inside, a cashier's check for $20,000 made out to the local elementary. Jack stared at it for a long time, then took it to Pastor Riley. The old man read the note, then leaned back in his chair. "You already know who it's from." Jack nodded. "She's not here to hurt this place," the pastor said. "Not like her father did." Jack looked up, startled. "You knew I married her parents, baptized her, buried her mother. I watched that house fill and empty and fall apart. Now she's trying to rebuild it, not just the wood and plaster, but the spirit." Why not tell anyone? Because this town is slow to forgive Jack. Some wounds look like wallpaper. They hide everything until the house collapses. That evening, Jack found Eleanor sitting on the back porch, knees pulled to her chest, staring at the overgrown garden. "I saw what you left," he said. She didn't turn. "It's not charity. I didn't say it was." She glanced at him then. "I'm not trying to buy my way back in. I know." He sat beside her. The porch creaked beneath them. "You care about this place," he said. She nodded. "It was the first place I ever felt safe. Before everything. Before my father's name made people flinch." Jack watched her face in the fading light. "You don't have to prove anything to me. I'm not trying to. But I am trying to prove it to myself." They sat in silence as dusk wrapped around them like a blanket. After a while, she asked, "Do you believe people can start over?" Jack took a breath. "I believe people can be forgiven, but only after they stop running." Eleanor looked down at her hands. "I'm tired of running," she whispered. Jack nodded. "Then stay." And for the first time, she didn't argue. In the distance, church bells chimed the hour. In the Hartley house, paint dried quietly on fresh walls. And in the heart of a woman who had once fled this town, something softer stirred something that looked dangerously like hope. The rain came suddenly, one of those spring showers that seemed to rise from the ground instead of fall from the sky. Jack stood in the attic of the Hartley house, hammer in hand, inspecting the ceiling near a leaky beam while the storm drummed its rhythm on the roof. Outside, the town blurred into gray and green. Below him, Eleanor and Lily sorted through old storage boxes they'd pulled from the basement. Jack had hesitated about letting Lily help, but Eleanor had offered with the kind of gentleness only earned through sincerity. And Lily, bright-eyed and curious, adored exploring forgotten places. "Daddy," Lily called from below. "Come see what we found." Jack wiped his hands on his jeans and descended the narrow steps. The scent of dust and rain hung in the air. In the parlor, Eleanor knelt on the rug beside an open trunk. Lily sat cross-legged beside her, holding a rolled-up piece of parchment tied with a red ribbon. Jack crouched. "What is it?" Lily unrolled the paper with care. It was a map, aged and yellowed, the kind used long before satellite images and street signs. Familiar streets of the town were marked in pen, but some had faded names scrawled beside them. Small red dots circled key locations: the town square, the elementary school, the church, and, most oddly, the Hartley house itself. Jack leaned closer. "This is hand-drawn. Probably 50-60 years old." Eleanor's face had gone still. Her eyes traced each curve, each mark with an intensity Jack hadn't seen before. "My father made this," she said softly. "He was obsessed with legacy, what he built, what he left behind." Jack looked at her. "Is this part of his plan?" She nodded. The red marks were places he believed held the soul of the town. He wanted to preserve them. Then, somewhere along the way, he decided the town wasn't worthy of saving. He wanted to remake it in his image, modern, efficient, profitable. And when the town resisted, he retaliated in silence. Quietly bought businesses, defaulted loans, tied people to contracts they didn't understand. Jack's jaw clenched. He hurt a lot of people. "I know," Eleanor whispered. "That's why I came back. I didn't want to own it. I wanted to understand what he broke, and see if it could be unbroken." She reached for a folded paper tucked inside the trunk. It was a letter, her father's handwriting, tight and precise. She scanned the page before handing it to Jack. "If they will not let me lead them, I will buy the road they walk on." Jack looked up, the words burning in his hands. "I hate what he became," Eleanor said, "but I loved the man he used to be, the one who taught me to plant tomatoes, who read to me every Sunday, before ambition swallowed him whole." Lily placed her hand on Eleanor's. "Maybe you're the one who can give back what he took," the girl said. Eleanor blinked, stunned by the child's clarity. Jack swallowed the knot in his throat. That evening, Jack stood on his porch watching the street. The storm had cleared, leaving everything crisp and clean, as if the rain had washed away more than just dirt. Across the street, the Hartley house glowed warm from within. Through the front window, Eleanor and Lily painted over a patch of cracked wall. It looked like a family, like something possible. Marcy's voice interrupted his thoughts. She stepped up beside him, 2 paper cups of coffee in hand. "You've been quiet lately," she said, handing him one. Jack took it, thinking. "You used to think less, smiled more." He chuckled. "I still smile. Not like you used to." They sipped in silence. "She told me the truth today," Jack finally said. Marcy turned. Her father destroyed this town for pride, but she came back to rebuild it in spite of him. "And you believe her?" Jack looked into his coffee, then up at the sky. "I believe people don't come back to a place unless they want to heal something. I think she's been carrying guilt that was never hers to begin with." Marcy studied him. "She's not the only one carrying guilt." Jack stiffened. "You want to tell her?" she asked. He didn't answer. "You should," Marcy said gently, "before the truth finds another way out." That night, Eleanor stood alone in the study, the map spread out before her, candlelight flickering over the worn paper. She'd walked those red-marked streets as a child. They had once felt safe, like home. Now they felt like decisions waiting to be made. She opened her journal. Day 22. The town is full of ghosts, but maybe ghosts only haunt us when we're too afraid to forgive ourselves. I can feel the town's heartbeat again, and for the first time I think it might be beating in sync with mine. 2 blocks away, Pastor Riley sat by the fire in his study, the map Eleanor had discreetly copied and delivered now open on his desk. His fingers hovered over the red marks. "Funny," he whispered, "how the same hands that laid down destruction can guide us back to grace." Then he picked up his phone. "Mayor's office, please," he said. "Tell them we may have a future worth fighting for again." Back at the Hartley house, Eleanor closed her journal, looked out the window, and for the first time in years, whispered a quiet prayer to no one in particular. Not for forgiveness, but for the strength to stay. And maybe, just maybe, for the courage to let someone love her back. The sirens shattered the silence like a jagged crack in glass. Jack jerked upright from the couch, heart pounding. Outside, the sky had darkened to an ominous greenish gray, the wind howling with a ferocity he hadn't heard in years. Thunder rolled low, long and menacing, like the sky was holding its breath, waiting to break. Lily appeared in the hallway, barefoot and pale. "Dad." He was already grabbing the emergency flashlight and his jacket. "It's a squall line. Let's go to the shelter now." As they stepped onto the porch, the air pulsed with static, the scent of wet soil and ozone thick. Leaves spiraled like frightened birds. Down the street, lights flickered in the Hartley house, and just as Jack locked the door, he saw Eleanor appear on her porch, her arms full of blankets and her face taut with urgency. Their eyes met across the chaos. "Basement," Jack called. "I'm heading to the church shelter," she shouted back. "I'll meet you there." But even as she turned, a massive gust of wind roared down the street, tearing limbs from trees. A distant crash, followed by a wail, told Jack the storm was already doing damage. Sirens from fire trucks howled in the distance. He grabbed Lily's hand and ran. At the shelter, families huddled in the cinder-block basement of the church, the hum of the generator a constant presence. Jack scanned the crowd anxiously. He saw Pastor Riley coordinating supplies, a few teenagers handing out bottled water, but no sign of Eleanor. Lily clung to his side. "Dad, I think something's wrong." Jack's phone buzzed. One missed call. "Eleanor." His gut tightened. She hadn't made it here. He turned to Pastor Riley. "She's not here." The pastor looked grim. "She might have stopped at the Miller barn. They use it as overflow. It's near the creek." Jack didn't hesitate. "Watch Lily." Pastor Riley placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "It's bad out there. She's alone." The road was slick and half-flooded. Jack's truck fishtailed once, but he kept his hand steady on the wheel. Debris littered the street's branches, a mailbox, someone's overturned garden chair. As he neared the old Miller barn, lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating the structure ahead. Then he saw it. A side wall of the barn had collapsed inward. A power line sparked nearby. Jack killed the engine and ran. Inside, the musty smell of wet hay and smoke hit him first. He heard coughing, then a voice. "Over here, Eleanor." She stood over a young boy, no more than 7, shielding him with her body. The boy was shaking a small cut, bleeding on his forehead. Eleanor's sleeve was torn, her hair plastered to her face, but her eyes were fierce. "He ran in here to hide," she said, breathless. "I couldn't get him out in time." Jack didn't pause. He lifted the boy gently and motioned for Eleanor to follow. Just as they cleared the doorway, another beam groaned overhead and crashed behind them with a deafening thud. Outside, Jack ran with the boy to the truck. Eleanor clambered in beside him, soaked and shivering. Jack slammed the door shut as the rain intensified. For a moment, none of them spoke, just the sound of breath, water, and heartbeat. Then Eleanor turned to the boy and cradled his face. "You're okay now. You're safe." Jack watched her awed. She hadn't hesitated. Back at the shelter, Jack carried the boy inside. Volunteers rushed forward, taking him gently to a medic. Eleanor followed, hair dripping, her lips pressed tight. Pastor Riley met them with a warm blanket and a look of pure relief. "You too," he started, then shook his head. "The whole town needs people like you." Eleanor smiled faintly. "I just happened to be in the wrong place." Jack pulled her aside, handed her a cup of coffee, and led her to a quiet corner. "You didn't have to go in there," he said. "I couldn't leave him." Jack nodded. "That's what I mean. Most people wouldn't." Eleanor stared into the cup. "I used to wonder if I could ever be more than my father's legacy. Tonight, I didn't think about that. I just knew someone needed help." Jack's voice was low. "That's the difference, Eleanor. Your father wanted control. You want connection." She looked up, eyes shining. "I didn't think you'd come for me," she admitted. Jack leaned forward. "You don't have to be alone anymore. Not in storms. Not in silence." By morning, the sky had cleared. Sunshine pierced through dissipating clouds, washing the town in light. The boy Eleanor had saved, Evan, sat beside his grateful mother, wrapped in a thick blanket and sipping hot chocolate. His eyes found Eleanor and Jack as they walked past, and he grinned shyly. Eleanor waved. "He's going to be all right?" Jack nodded. "So are you." They walked side by side into the daylight, the town slowly emerging from the wreckage. Broken things would need fixing, but that was what they were good at, both of them. As they passed the town square, Eleanor paused, looking at the statue in the center, a cracked marble memorial of the town's founders. She turned to Jack. "What if we built something new? Not just restored what was, but reimagined what could be?" Jack's answer was simple. "Then let's do it. Together." And for the first time since returning, Eleanor didn't feel like she was trespassing in her own story. She felt home. By the next morning, the storm had passed, but its wake stirred more than downed branches and flooded roads. It stirred conversation. And in a town like Briar Glen, conversation meant speculation. And speculation spread faster than any storm ever could. At Miller's Diner, where eggs sizzled and gossip flowed as freely as the coffee, Eleanor Hartley's name had become the topic of the hour. "She's the one who fixed the school art room right, and helped at the shelter last night." "Yeah, but she's a Hartley. You know what her father did to this place? Maybe she's just here to finish what he started." Jack heard it all as he stepped in for his usual morning coffee, feeling the shift in air as heads turned. He met a few eyes, nodded, but said nothing, until he spotted Marcy behind the counter. She slid him a cup without asking. "Rough night." He nodded. "She saved a kid's life." Marcy leaned in, voice low. "Doesn't matter to some folks. They only see the last name." Jack took a sip and looked around. Then maybe it's time they saw the whole person. Across town, Eleanor stood at the edge of the town square watching volunteers clean up fallen tree limbs and shattered planter boxes. Her boots were still muddy. She'd barely slept. She should have felt pride, relief, maybe even hope. Instead, she felt the weight of sideways glances and whispered words. The past had claws, and even when you buried it, it scratched its way back to the surface. Morning said a warm voice behind her. She turned to find Pastor Riley, a rake in one hand, a sun hat tucked under his arm. "I've heard things," he said casually. "Good things." She smiled faintly. "You've also heard the other things." He chuckled. "This town's got a long memory, Eleanor, but a good heart too. Sometimes it just takes a little time for the two to talk to each other." She exhaled, shoulders slumping. "I thought if I worked hard enough, gave enough, maybe I could rewrite what my family name meant." Riley shook his head. "You're not here to rewrite. You're here to redeem. And those are two very different things." He handed her the rake. "Start with the flower beds. People believe what they see." Later that day, Eleanor walked into the town council building. Heads turned as she entered the same way they had when her father used to march through those doors, except his presence was thunderous. Hers was quiet, steady. The mayor, a balding man with honest eyes, met her at the chamber door. "Miss Hartley," he said, standing. "You're a surprise?" She nodded. "So is life." He offered her a seat. "How can we help you?" "I don't want anything from the town," she said. "Not power, not profit. I just want to help make things whole again." He frowned gently. "And how do you plan to do that?" She reached into her folder and laid down documents, design plans, restoration budgets, grant applications already in progress. "I've been working on a private initiative, reinvestment through restoration, for the school, the library, the community center. The town owns the heart. I just want to help it beat stronger." The mayor studied her for a long moment, then smiled. "You're not your father, Ms. Hartley." "No," she said, "but I've had to carry the consequences of who he was. I'd like to carry something better now." That evening, Jack stood outside his house waiting. He didn't know if she'd come. Lily was inside drawing again. After the shelter, she hadn't stopped sketching. Jack knew why. Art was how Lily made sense of the world. It was how her mother had, too. Then Eleanor appeared. She walked slowly, her coat pulled tight, expression unreadable. "Rough day?" he asked. She stopped in front of him. "I stood in the council chamber today, and for the first time I didn't feel like a Hartley trying to erase something. I felt like me." Jack nodded, silent. "I still feel like an outsider," she added. He gestured toward the porch swing. "Then sit. Be inside." They sat side by side like two people who'd stopped pretending they were fine alone. After a while, Eleanor spoke again. "People are talking." Jack smirked. "They always do." "I don't want to hurt you. You won't. I already have. By not telling you who I was right away." He looked at her gently. "You told me when it mattered." She turned to him, eyes tired but shining. "You still believe in me." He didn't answer. Instead, he reached for her hand. "I believe in what you do when no one's watching." The next morning, a quiet shift began. The library's broken windows were repaired. The playground fence stood straighter, and a hand-painted sign appeared in the bakery window. "Thank you, Eleanor. Welcome home." Back at the Hartley house, Eleanor stood at the mantel holding the old photograph of her father. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She just whispered, "I'm doing it differently." Then she set the photo down, not in reverence, but in peace. And in the garden outside, the first green shoots of spring finally broke through the soil. The call came just before dawn. A sharp knock at Jack's front door, urgent but measured. Jack opened it to find Marcy dressed in a flannel coat and holding a thermos. Her eyes were clear, her mouth set with something between frustration and concern. "We need to talk," she said without preamble. Jack stepped aside. "Coffee's fresh." She shook the thermos in her hand. "So is this. Let's sit on the porch." They sat in silence for a moment, steam rising from their mugs, the horizon barely glowing with the promise of morning. Marcy was one of the few people in Jack's life who didn't dance around hard truths. She didn't believe in slow reveals, just clean breaks. "I saw you with her yesterday," she began. Jack took a long sip. "You mean Eleanor?" "I mean the woman who walked into this town with the weight of her last name and hasn't buckled once under it." Jack turned to her, surprised. "She's proving herself," Marcy continued. "And frankly, I admire that. But that's not why I'm here." Jack waited. "You're building walls again." His grip tightened on the mug. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do," she said quietly. "I saw the way you looked at her. And I've seen the way you avoid it." He didn't respond. "You want to let her in, but you're scared." Still silence. "I get it, Jack," she softened. "You lost someone. You built a life around surviving that loss. But surviving isn't the same as living. And Lily, she sees it too. You don't think she's waiting for you to stop just surviving?" The words landed like pebbles on the surface of a still lake, quiet but impossible to ignore. Jack finally spoke. "I'm not sure I know how to live again." Marcy turned to him. "Then, maybe it's time you tried." Later that day, Jack found himself walking without a plan. his feet carrying him toward the one place he hadn't been in years, the small plot at the edge of town where wildflowers grew between headstones and silence held its own sacred weight. He stood before a modest gray stone etched with the name Grace Lawson, his late wife. The breeze whispered through the trees as he crouched, fingers brushing the grass. "I'm not replacing you," he murmured. "I know you'd want me to be brave. I didn't know how." He closed his eyes. "There's someone. She's not what I expected. She's complicated and guarded, but she's good. And Lily, she already loves her." His throat tightened. "I just needed you to know that." The wind lifted again, rustling the leaves like an answer. Back at the Hartley house, Eleanor stood in the hallway staring at a faded patch on the wall where a mirror used to hang. She reached out and touched the bare space, feeling the cold plaster beneath her fingertips. Her phone buzzed. A message from Pastor Riley. He knows, and he's not walking away. She exhaled slowly. Relief came not in joy, but in quiet surrender. Moments later, there was a knock at the front door. Jack stood there dressed in a clean flannel shirt, a tool belt slung loosely around his waist. "I thought I'd finally fix that sagging floorboard in the library," he said. Eleanor smiled. "You don't have to come with a hammer every time." He stepped inside, eyes scanning the hallway. "No, but it's easier than showing up with an apology." She arched a brow. "For what? For holding back? For pretending I wasn't scared?" She waited. Jack met her gaze. "You're not the only one who carries ghosts in this town." Eleanor's face softened. "Then, maybe we stop pretending we have to face them alone." They worked side by side in the library, removing a warped floorboard and replacing it with new wood. Jack showed her how to align the beam supports, and Eleanor, always a quick learner, picked up the rhythm with ease. Between hammer blows and shared glances, something shifted. The air was lighter, the silences no longer heavy. As they packed up, Eleanor hesitated. "There's something you should know," she said. Jack stilled. "I know about the mall project." He frowned. "What, the development proposal from years ago, the one that would have leveled half the downtown block?" Jack's shoulders tensed. "That was before Grace got sick. I submitted the proposal when I was trying to leave this town behind. I thought money and success would fix everything." "But you didn't go through with it," Eleanor said gently. "No," he whispered. "When Grace died, everything stopped. I pulled the plans. I stayed. But I've always hated myself for even thinking about abandoning this place." Eleanor stepped closer. "Jack, we all think about running. What matters is who we become when we choose to stay." His voice cracked. "I didn't think I deserved this. Any of it." She took his hand. "Then let me tell you the truth. You do." That evening, as the sun dipped below the hills, Lily sat at the kitchen table, sketching. Jack and Eleanor sat nearby, sipping tea and watching her draw. "She's putting us in her storybook," Jack said. Eleanor smiled. "How do you know she always draws what matters most?" Lily looked up, grinning. "I'm calling it The Girl Who Brought the Garden Back." Eleanor's heart swelled, and for the first time the title didn't feel like a burden. It felt like a beginning. Outside the porch, light flickered on. Inside, for the first time in years, every room in the Hartley house was lit. The morning sun filtered gently through the lace curtains of the Hartley house, casting soft patterns across the wooden floors. Eleanor stood in the kitchen, her hands wrapped around a steaming mug of tea, her gaze drifting out to the garden where wild daffodils had started to bloom. There was something unfamiliar in the air, something weightless. Peace. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It crept in like a quiet visitor, bringing with it the realization that the walls she had so carefully built were no longer holding back dread, but holding in warmth. And that terrified her more than anything else ever had. She was still sipping her tea when she heard the knock. Eleanor opened the door to find Lily breathless and bright-eyed, clutching a folded piece of paper. I drew something, the girl said, holding it out with both hands. It's for you. Eleanor accepted it, gently kneeling to open the drawing on the porch steps. It was a colorful illustration, crayon lines over heavy paper. In the middle stood a house that looked suspiciously like the Hartley house, but with a garden in full bloom and birds flying overhead. In front of it stood 3 people holding hands, a tall man with messy brown hair, a woman with gray-blue eyes and a red scarf, and a little girl between them smiling like the sun itself. Below the picture, written in blocky, uneven letters, were the words, "My family." Eleanor didn't speak for a long moment. Her throat closed, her chest tight with something dangerously close to tears. Lily watched her. "You don't have to keep it. I just wanted you to see." Eleanor looked up, her voice trembling. "Lily, this is beautiful." The girl beamed. "Dad said families don't always start the way we expect. Sometimes we build them." Eleanor smiled softly and reached for the girl's hand. "Your dad is a wise man." Lily leaned in, whispering as if revealing a secret. "He's scared sometimes. I think he doesn't want to lose anything again." Eleanor blinked back, the sting in her eyes. "Me too." That afternoon, Jack stopped by to finish the last of the flooring repairs. Eleanor met him on the porch, still holding Lily's drawing. "She gave me this," Eleanor said, unfolding it carefully. Jack glanced down and froze. His breath caught. "I didn't know she was going to do that," he said. "She's always had a way of knowing more than she should." Eleanor studied his face. "You're a good father, Jack." "I'm trying," he said, his voice quiet. "You're doing," she corrected. "That's more than most." He nodded slowly. "And you are you." "Staying." She hesitated. "I was going to leave," she confessed. "Before I met you. Before I let myself see this place again. I thought coming back would feel like punishment. But now, I'm not sure where else I'd want to be." Jack exhaled long and steady, like someone letting go of a burden they'd carried too far. "I don't want to lose you," he said. Eleanor looked at him. "You never had to earn me, Jack. You just had to believe I wasn't going to run." They stood in the stillness, the wind brushing past like a gentle exhale. Then quietly Jack reached for her hand. That evening, Eleanor sat at her desk, the drawing from Lily propped beside her. The pages of her journal lay open, but for the first time in weeks she didn't need to write to make sense of her thoughts. Instead, she began drafting a letter. "To the people of Briar Glen. You don't know me as anything but the daughter of a man who hurt this town. You have every right to hold that memory tightly, but what I've come to learn is that we are not only the legacy we inherit, we are also the legacy we choose to leave behind. So I'm choosing to stay. Not because I've earned your forgiveness, but because I believe in the beauty of starting over. In the power of healing together. Sincerely, Eleanor Hartley." She folded the letter and placed it in an envelope, then looked out at the town she once fled from and now perhaps belonged to again. At Jack's house, Lily taped her drawing to the refrigerator door. She stood back, arms crossed like a curator. Jack came into the kitchen, drying his hands on a dish towel. "That where it goes," Lily nodded. "For now. Maybe later it can go somewhere more permanent." Jack looked at the drawing again, the bright colors, the smiling faces, the word family, written with such innocence and certainty. He reached out and smoothed the edges gently. "Yeah," he whispered. "Maybe it can." The next morning, the Hartley house porch held a new detail. Tacked beside the doorbell was Lily's drawing, laminated and framed in wood Jack had sanded smooth by hand. Beneath it, a simple brass plaque read, "Planted in kindness. Built by love." And for the first time in decades, every passerby who looked toward that once abandoned house didn't see scandal or shame. They saw something blooming, something worth coming home to. The smell of smoke hit Eleanor before the sirens did. She was walking back from the bakery, Marcy's cinnamon rolls wrapped neatly under her arm, when she noticed the haze rising above the town square. a faint gray cloud swirling against the bright morning sky. The scent sharpened with every step, unmistakable now burning wood, plastic paper. She dropped the bag and ran. By the time she reached the community center, flames had already licked up one side of the building. Smoke poured from shattered windows. Screams echoed from inside, children, teachers, volunteers. Panic slammed into her like a wall. People were backing away. Fire trucks had been dispatched, but traffic delayed their arrival. Jack was nowhere in sight. Eleanor didn't hesitate. She kicked off her heels and raced to the main door. Inside, chaos. The fire hadn't yet reached the center of the building, but black smoke coiled through the halls like a living thing. Coughing, shouting the metallic clang of chairs and feet scrambling. She could hear them kids calling for help. Eleanor pulled her scarf over her mouth and pushed forward. She found the first child, a boy no older than 6, curled beneath a desk, eyes wide with terror. She scooped him into her arms. "Come on, sweetheart. We're getting out." 2 more children clung to the stairwell railing. A teacher coughed uncontrollably nearby, trying to lead them, but too overwhelmed to guide them out. Eleanor took charge. Her voice rang through the smoke, clear and commanding. "This way. Stay low. One hand on the wall. We're going out the back." They followed. One step, then another. Outside, Jack had just arrived. His truck screeched to a halt, gravel flying as he jumped from the cab. He spotted the flames and sprinted toward the side entrance, then saw her. Eleanor emerged through the smoke arms full of children, her face streaked with soot. A group followed behind her, clinging to her every word. Her blouse was singed at the sleeve. She looked wild, powerful, radiant. He ran to meet her, grabbed the boy from her arms, and guided the rest to safety. "Are you out of your mind?" he shouted once everyone was clear. She shook her head, panting. They were still inside. He stared at her. "You could have been killed, and they could have been left behind," she said, voice shaking. Not with fear, but with conviction. A beat of silence. Then Jack pulled her into a hug so fierce she nearly collapsed. "You didn't just walk into that fire," he whispered. "You walked into everything you were afraid of." She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The fire was eventually controlled. The damage, though serious, hadn't reached the foundation thanks to her quick thinking. No lives were lost. A miracle, they called it. By afternoon, the square was quiet again except for whispers. She saved them. She ran straight into the building. Not her father's daughter, after all. Maybe she's exactly what this town needs. Later that night, Jack brought Eleanor to his house. Lily met them at the door with a blanket and a cup of chamomile tea. "You're a hero," Lily said, wide-eyed. Eleanor smiled softly. "I'm just someone who didn't look away." "You were brave," the girl insisted. Eleanor knelt to her level. "You know what brave really means. It's not about not being scared. It's about doing it anyway because someone else needs you to." Lily nodded like she was committing the words to memory. Then, with the kind of matter-of-fact tenderness only a child could pull off, she wrapped Eleanor in a hug that made her eyes sting. Jack led her to the porch after Lily went to bed. They sat in silence for a while. The stars shimmered overhead, the air cool and calm, a stark contrast to the day's earlier chaos. "She's right," Jack finally said. "You were brave." Eleanor stared into the night. "I didn't even think. I just went. That's what made it real." She turned to him. "Do you know the worst part? He waited. When I came back here, I told myself I'd stay long enough to give back what my father took. Fix the reputation, set things straight, and then I'd leave before people got too close. Before I did." Jack's jaw tightened, and now, she looked at him, eyes shimmering in the porch light. "Now, I don't want to leave. Not because of duty, not because I owe anyone, but because I love this place. I love what it's becoming, what I'm becoming in it." Jack reached for her hand. "Then stay." She smiled, small and unsure. "I'm scared." "So am I," he said. "But maybe we stop waiting to be ready. Maybe we just choose. The next morning, Eleanor walked into the town hall and asked for a meeting with the mayor. She didn't bring a folder this time. No budgets, no grant proposals, just a promise. "I'm not here as a donor or a name," she said. "I'm here as a neighbor. I want to help rebuild the center not as a Hartley but as Eleanor. Someone who knows what it means to stand inside a burning building and choose not to run." The mayor nodded solemnly. "Then let's rebuild it. Together." By sunset, volunteers gathered at the lot. Jack, Marcy, Pastor Riley, a dozen more. They brought shovels, tool belts, wood paint, whatever they had. Eleanor stood in the center surrounded by a town she once feared would never accept her. Now they looked to her with something more powerful than forgiveness. Trust. And in that golden light with Lily planting new flowers near the scorched foundation, Eleanor realized something: the fire hadn't destroyed what mattered. It had revealed it. And from that they would build again, stronger, kinder together. The sound of hammers echoed across the square, mingling with children's laughter and the low hum of community chatter. The heart of Briar Glen was beating again, no longer faint or fractured, but steady, vibrant, alive. Eleanor stood near the edge of the construction site where the community center once stood. What had been scorched timber and ash just weeks before was now a rising skeleton of hope. Frameworks were being lifted into place. Fresh paint covered scaffolding. Flower beds. Lily's idea framed the perimeter, already bursting with color. She wasn't in heels or business attire today. She wore denim jeans boots caked in dust and a rebuild Briar Glen t-shirt like the rest of the volunteers. Her hands bore calluses now, her nails chipped from hours of manual labor. And, for the first time in her life, she felt entirely herself. "Hey," Hartley Marcy called with a smirk. "Think you missed a spot." Eleanor turned just in time to catch the playful toss of a paintbrush which she narrowly avoided, though a splatter of bright blue landed square on her cheek. She laughed, reaching for the nearest brush in retaliation, but paused when she saw Jack approaching his tool belt slung low on his hip, carrying a fresh stack of building permits. "Good news," he said. "The town council approved the revised blueprint." Eleanor blinked. "The one with the community garden and outdoor stage, and your idea for the shared library space," he confirmed. "They loved it." She exhaled. "I wasn't sure they'd go for it." Jack shrugged. "Turns out they trust the woman who saved their kids, stood in their fire, and never once asked for credit." Their eyes met. The gratitude in his gaze wasn't romantic or dramatic. It was something deeper. Earned. Shared. "I'm glad I stayed," she said softly. "I'm glad you stayed too," he replied, "but not just for the town." Later that afternoon, the town square gathered for an impromptu announcement. Eleanor hadn't planned to speak, but Pastor Riley gently insisted, saying simply, "Sometimes the people need to hear it from the one who lit the match to rebuild." A hush fell over the crowd as she stepped onto the makeshift platform. She looked out not at strangers anymore, but neighbors, friends, people who had once eyed her with suspicion, now nodding in quiet solidarity. "I came back to this town thinking I could restore what my family broke," she began. "I thought the solution was money, plans, control." She paused, the wind brushing a strand of hair across her cheek. "But what I've learned is that you don't rebuild a town with concrete and budgets. You rebuild it with people, with shared meals and paint-streaked hands, with second chances and hard conversations, with kindness." She let the words settle. "I used to think legacy was something you left behind. Now I know it's something you build together." A beat of silence, then applause. Warm, honest, growing in strength until it filled the square with a sound that made her chest ache in the best way. The next morning, Eleanor sat on the steps of the Hartley house watching as Lily ran barefoot through the lawn, chasing butterflies. Jack joined her with 2 mugs of coffee and sat beside her, his shoulder brushing hers. "You know," he said, "I heard the mayor's office is planning to name the rebuilt center after someone." Eleanor grimaced. "If they name it after me, I'm painting over the sign myself." Jack grinned. "Not you." She turned. They want to name it the Lawson Hartley Center. For Lily. For you. For us. For what it all became. She swallowed hard. That's a lot. It's right, he said, because this wasn't just your redemption arc. It was all of ours. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the sunrise stretch its fingers across the town. I have something for you, Jack added, reaching into his back pocket. He pulled out a sealed envelope and handed it to her. Eleanor opened it carefully, revealing an architectural rendering, hand-drawn classic lines mixed with soft curves. A new town square layout. But the label at the bottom caught her breath. Designed by Eleanor Hartley. Project lead Jack Lawson. She looked at him, stunned. You want me to lead the redesign? He nodded. You've already been leading it. I'm not licensed. I'm not even. You're exactly what this place needs, he interrupted. You see people. You see what matters. She blinked back tears. You really believe in me, I believe in us, he said. But even if I didn't, you've already proven enough to everyone else. That evening, the town gathered once more, not for a meeting or a fire or a crisis, but for music. Lily danced barefoot on the newly laid bricks of the temporary stage, spinning in circles with other children under strings of lanterns. Marcy served lemonade from a fold-out table. Pastor Riley offered a prayer brief and heartfelt. The square smelled of fresh-cut grass and baked pies, and at the center of it all stood Eleanor, no longer a stranger. No longer the daughter of the man who nearly broke the town, but the woman who helped rebuild it. As the music swelled and laughter rang into the night, Jack took her hand. Think this is what peace feels like? He asked. She leaned her head on his shoulder. No, this is what home feels like. And across the square, hung on the wall of the half-finished community center, was a wooden sign painted by Lily's own hands, built with kindness. Held by love. The town had reclaimed more than its buildings. It had reclaimed its heart. The morning of the festival dawned golden and gentle, as if the sun itself had chosen to celebrate alongside them. The town square, once scarred by flame and silence, now pulsed with life. Banners fluttered in the breeze. Booths lined the sidewalks decorated in ribbons and sunflowers. The scent of baked goods, fresh paint, and blooming lilies mingled into something that could only be described as hope made tangible. Jack stood at the edge of the square, hammer in hand, adjusting the final string of lanterns. A few feet away, Lily twirled in a new dress, pale yellow with tiny daisies along the hem, rehearsing the opening number for the children's play that would begin at dusk. Dad. She called, arms stretched wide. I don't need a script anymore. I remember all my lines. Jack grinned, shading his eyes with one hand. I believe you. Just don't forget to breathe. Lily rolled her eyes like only a confident 10-year-old could. I've got this. As she skipped off to join her classmates, Jack felt the presence beside him before he turned. Eleanor. She wore a light blue sundress, her hair in soft waves, and a single daffodil tucked behind her ear. Her hands held nothing, no blueprints, no burden. Just a quiet calm that mirrored the clarity in her eyes. Jack offered a playful nudge. You clean up well, Hartley. She smiled. You don't look too bad yourself, Lawson. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the preparations unfold. Townspeople bustled around them, cheerful, collaborative, familiar. Somewhere behind the gazebo, Marcy's bakery team iced cupcakes with ferocious focus. Near the new garden beds, Pastor Riley was giving a group of teenagers a very animated history lesson, which no one seemed to be paying attention to, but no one wanted to interrupt either. Eleanor reached into her pocket and handed Jack a folded piece of paper. He raised an eyebrow. It's official, she said. The deed to the Hartley house. I signed it over to the town this morning. Jack blinked. You're giving it away. I'm donating it as a creative center, she said. Workshops, small performances, a reading room. A place for second chances. Jack opened the paper, then looked up at her. That's a big gesture. It's not a gesture, Eleanor replied. It's a beginning. The festival kicked off at noon with a ribbon cutting at the rebuilt community center. The crowd gathered, clapping and cheering as the mayor handed the scissors to Eleanor and Jack, their hands overlapping as they cut through the bright red ribbon. A brass plaque gleamed beside the door, the Lawson Hartley Center for Community and Kindness, built in remembrance. Reborn in hope. Inside the walls were lined with art children's drawings, black and white photos of the town's past, and a mural painted by local volunteers depicting hands of all sizes, planting seeds in soil that shimmered with golden light. Lily led the children's theater troupe in a heart-melting performance of The Girl Who Brought the Garden, back her own story reframed as a fairy tale. The audience laughed, cried, and stood for a standing ovation as the curtain closed on a smiling cast. After the show, Eleanor crouched beside Lily and pulled her into a tight hug. "You were magic," she whispered. Lily beamed. "It was your story, too." As twilight settled, the townspeople gathered for the lantern release. It was a new tradition, the first of many the community hoped to carry on. Each person wrote a wish or gratitude message on a small slip of paper, attached it to a paper lantern, and released it into the dusk sky. Eleanor stood beside Jack and Lily, their fingers brushing as they lit their lanterns together. "I wrote something," Jack said softly. Eleanor glanced at him. "What did you wish for?" He shook his head. "No wish, just thanks. For the day you walked back into this town. For the woman you became. For the one who stayed." Eleanor turned to him, her eyes glistening. "I didn't know what home felt like until I saw it through your eyes." Their lantern lifted into the sky, joining dozens of others rising slowly, gracefully, as if the entire town were exhaling one long, collective breath. The final event of the evening was held under the soft glow of lanterns strung between oak trees. Tables were set beneath the stars. String music played in the background. People danced, laughed, remembered. Jack stood with Eleanor near the edge of the dance floor. For a moment, neither moved. Then he extended his hand. "May I have this dance?" Eleanor smiled, placing her hand in his. "You already have." They moved together slowly at first, then, with growing ease, not polished, not perfect, but honest, like the life they were building. Marcy passed by and gave Jack a wink. Pastor Riley raised a glass from across the square. Lily dozed off in a chair beside the mural, her head resting on her sketchbook. The music faded into something slow and beautiful, the kind of song that made people believe in ordinary miracles. Much later, when most of the town had gone home, Jack and Eleanor sat on the steps of the community center watching the final lanterns drift over the horizon. "I used to think I had to prove I was different than my father," Eleanor said quietly. Jack nodded. "But now I know. I didn't need to be different from him. I just needed to be true to myself." He reached over, took her hand gently. "And who is that?" She smiled, leaning her head on his shoulder. "A woman who stayed, who believed, who loved." Jack kissed her forehead, and for a long moment they said nothing at all. At the far end of the square, just beneath the Hartley house's second-story window, a new bench had been installed. Carved into its back was an inscription, simple but lasting: "To those who believed kindness could rebuild everything." And beneath that, in smaller letters, Briar Glen, a town reborn. As the final lantern disappeared into the stars, the town rested not in endings, but in beginnings. And in the hearts of those who had once been broken, something new had taken root, something whole, something enduring, something home. Where are you watching from? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Did this story move you, inspire you, or remind you of something close to your heart? Share your feelings in the comments below. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new story that warms your soul. Thank you so much for watching. Your time means the world to us. See you in the next story. Single dad was